My next guest is a Nashville legend. He's sold more than 8 million albums since his 1991 debut, All I Can Be, and is a 5-time nominee for the Country Music Association Male Vocalist of the Year. He's had 24 top 10 records, 16 of them #1 hits. He's the national spokesman for Terry Schiavo's Life and Hope Network, and he's also the author of a new autobiography, A Voice Undefeated. He joined me recently here in our D.C. studio. Here's my conversation with Collin Raye. Collin, at the top of this autobiography, you open with the death of your granddaughter, which I'm sure many readers go, this is kind of an odd place to start this story. Why did you feel it had to be front and center? And tell me who she was and the influence she's had on your life.
Well, she was my first of 2 grandchildren. I'm blessed with 2 awesome grandgirls, and Haley passed away in 2010, and she had had a neurological disorder, I guess, since birth, but we didn't realize there was anything wrong with her until she was probably 3. And then she started not progressing, and then by the time she was 4, started regressing, and it was a long, long journey of hospitals and medical, any politician I knew that knew somebody at a hospital, I was pulling out every card I had to get her help, and no one could ever diagnose what was wrong with her. And then we lost her unexpectedly. Believe it or not, it was still unexpected because she was actually pretty healthy at the time she passed away. But we opened the book with that. It was suggested to me by someone at Ignatius at the publishing company that might be a good way to an impacting way to get to open, because it was sort of, I talk about that in the book as sort of being a real pinnacle in my life, because you talk about, a life story, a memoir is about all your ups and downs, and the basic, I was born here and I raised here and I got into music and I made it in the music business and I achieved all this stuff, and then I lost some stuff and I achieved some more of it back, and it has all that stuff, but the real, if there was one crux of my life, it would have been that day at her funeral, because that was the most amazingly profound and humbling week of my life. When you realize as a father, it's in our DNA to be, we're patriarchs and we're going to fix everything. And I tried for years to fix this for my family and for her, and failed. And God brought me to my knees as far down as you can go. And there I was 5 days later at the funeral, and they're asking me if I'm ready to have the casket closed, because my daughter's already gone out to the family car, and it was left up to me to decide that. And I don't know, that moment just struck me as something so overwhelmingly significant, because I knew we were never going to be able to look at that face ever again and kiss her, those little cheeks ever again, this side of heaven. And it, when it's closed, it's closed. It's a very final moment, and I felt like my life kind of spun on a dime at that moment. So we felt like it was a good time, a good place to start the book, and then back up and go back to the beginning into more traditional.
How did it change you? How did the loss of your granddaughter? It obviously reoriented so much of your life and your career.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I think because just like we look back on the history of the earth, even people who don't recognize Christ as the Son of God and all that still have to use BC when they talk about, the world the world history is divided into BC and AD, and it's all about the life, that 33 years of life that he lived here. Whether anybody wants to accept that or not, that's the way it is. And for me, I saw that moment even at the time, and I knew it that day. I thought, from this point forward, my life will always be before Haley and after Haley, because everything else was this huge struggle. Had a lot of struggles along the way. There was lots of different tests that God gave me throughout my life, but a lot of great lofty moments, and had experienced all this. But my family had always been everything to me, and that little baby girl was the center of our everything. And when you realize she's gone now, everything's always going to be different. Yeah. I think that was...
And you all never could figure out what the neurological disorder was that took her.
And since then, it's weird. I have talked to quite a few families who have children who have something extremely, eerily similar to what Haley had, and they have no diagnosis either. So when it comes to neurological stuff and the brain in general, medical science still knows so little.
Let's go back. Tell me about growing up in Arkansas, your mother and father, Floyd and Lois, and what they gave you, what you picked up from them.
Well, I think, 2 things I think stand out, because it certainly wasn't a beaver cleaver life, but very few people have.
That's right.
And I was
Everybody
never,
has
everybody
dysfunction.
has that dysfunction stuff, and we were no different. And they were divorced by the time I was 11, and I remember being actually kind of glad because I just wanted to see the fighting stop. I was like, hey, leave me out of it. I like you both,
Yeah.
My brother, I think it bothered him a little more because he was a little older about that. But I remember, first of all, the love of music. And passing it on. My mom was a professional singer, and she'd sang since she was a kid and just really gifted. And my dad was a musician, so the love of music, all kinds of music, but primarily, I think country music especially, was that's where that came from. And it was the reason I became good at it early in life is because I'd been around it my whole life. Like Tiger Woods swinging a golf club at 4 years old. If you do something all your life, you should be pretty good at it at some point. And
Your mother was a backup singer for Elvis.
she did for a short time. It wasn't like a official. She was only 17 when that happened, but she got to sing. Her and her sister got to sing on 6 different shows with Elvis and Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis. But the big story was Elvis, of course. They got to sing backup with him for about 6 shows during a little tour that Sun Records roster was doing in '56, I think.
Yeah.
And so she,
The $1 Million Quartet.
Yeah. And that story got bigger and bigger as the years went on. Bless her heart. But she's actually in a nursing home now with dementia. And I would give anything to hear her tell one of those exaggerated stories now. Because now she's just so medicated and doesn't really remember anything. But I think the other thing I got from my parents was a love of, taught me how to pray. My mom, I should say especially, she taught me how to pray and taught me the importance of it, how vital it was.
Southern Baptist family.
Southern Baptist. And I'm thankful for that because even though I walked away from it as I grew up, in many ways I think I outgrew it. No offense to anyone, but I think I outgrew that doctrine and that simplicity of it. But it did teach me how to have a relationship with God, and I knew He was always there. People have said, "When did you realize that God was real?" So I always have. I never really had a moment in my life where I doubted. I always knew because I could feel Him. I always had a pretty thick spiritual, sensitive spiritual discernment ability, and I could always feel His hand on the back of my neck. I used to call it. Whenever I would start to get into trouble, I could almost physically feel someone pulling me back or turning me the other way, and I knew who it was.
Tell me about. I want to work toward the conversion. But tell me, your music career, your solo career really starts in the 80s. But before that, you're performing with your mother and your brother. And tell me about that. Well,
that was a great time because, as we all look back on those teen years of your life and even early 20s, but especially your teen years, and you realize, if you're lucky enough to realize that you're pretty good at something and you want to pursue it, everything is so much in front of you, and it's all dreams. It's all, and there's really nothing to feel bad about because you just know at some point things are going to get good, and you don't think about the pitfalls that are going to come with it and all that because they don't exist in your psyche, But getting to sing, I learned how to sing harmony sitting on the couch with my mom and brother who already knew how to do things like that, and they taught me, and I realized I had an ear for it. They brought that out in me, and to this day, I've sang with some of the greatest harmony singers on earth in the studio and on stage, and I've never felt my voice feel so good and warm and perfect in a grouping than it was with my mother and brother singing together. But it's beautiful, I think, when you have that sort of validation at home, because a lot of musicians, the thing is, when are you going to get a real job? This thing's not going to pan out. And I never had to deal with that. I always had a lot of support at home.
Beautiful. It wasn't until 1983, you were, 23 years old, when you feel drawn to the Catholic faith. Why?
It's weird because I never really... that's why I knew it was of God, because I never really thought about it. It wasn't like I had this fascination with it when I was a kid, because growing up in the Bible Belt, the way I was,
And where were you when this happened?
That would have been Texarkana, Texas, which is right on the Arkansas line.
So you had to know some Catholics, encounter something.
Not many, but few. I make a joke when I speak about it. That usually gets a laugh, and it's true though. In Texarkana City of about 55,000, there was one Catholic church, I think still is, and it services a huge area. And everyone would, when you drive by it, everybody would kind of speed by a little faster, don't make eye contact, And then there was a Mormon church that everyone sped by even faster, and then maybe, 3 or 4 Presbyterian churches, 3 or 4 Methodist, and then 187 Baptist churches, you know, so the Baptist rule down there, you know, and that's what we were. But I never had a problem with it. And I always knew when I would hear some of those horrible misconceptions that are just ridiculous, I just knew they were ridiculous. When somebody would say stuff like, you know, you got to watch out them Catholics, they worship them statues. And you go, I don't think that's what's going on in there. I mean, because I'd see movies, you know, I'd watch The Bells of St. Mary's Going My Way, and I go, they seem like Christians to me. You know, that doesn't, you know, but that was, I had a very limited knowledge, and none of my friends were Catholics. But fast forward now to 1982, 83, and I'm in Portland, Oregon, where we're living at the time with my little band. I'm just a youngster, but I knew I felt pulled to get back into church somehow, and I knew the church that I had grown up in wasn't for me. And to me, I learned a lot of great things from it, and I learned how to discern things by the Bible and the Word of God, and I know my Bible pretty well. But it would bother me when people would say things like, well, you know, if you just accept the Lord one time as your personal Savior, you're good to go no matter what you do the rest of your life. And I was like, really? That's all there is to it. That's it. That's all you got to do. So I remember when I was 14 challenging the minister at Westlawn Baptist Church one time. I said, and I was forward thinking for my age. I remember asking him, I said, so Reverend, you're saying that, I think I might have used, I don't know if it was Ted Bundy, but someone like that. I said, so you're saying if, like, you know, a serial killer like that, that's done all these horrible things, gets saved 5 minutes before he goes to the electric chair, and it's really is saved. He really does believe, and he's truly sorry. And then him and Billy Graham die at the exact same moment. They're just going to walk hand in hand into heaven together. You bet. And I just thought that, you know, I just don't. That doesn't add up to me. It's not fair. And God is not a God of chaos, and He's a God of fair justice, and where's the justice in that? So the whole idea of purgatory, I always felt like there had to be something else. There had to be another step. Can that guy go to heaven? Absolutely. But walk right in with Billy Graham? I don't think so. You know, things like that would always just rub me the wrong way, I guess. And so there we were in Portland, Oregon. It was a couple that came to the shows we used to do up there, and they always were just so sweet, and she wore a crucifix around her neck all the time, so I figured she was a Catholic, and I just asked if I could go to Mass with them one time, and they were excited and said yes. Went with them the next week, and I walked in. This sounds cliche, but I walked into Our Lady of Sorrows Church in Portland, Oregon, and because my heart was open. That's when I always tell people, you got to be open to it. You got to have your heart open. If you're just staunchly, stubbornly in love with what you're doing, then you're not going to feel these things. But I was open, and I felt this presence in that little building that I had never experienced in any church of any kind, because the churches I was used to being in were like fellowship halls, you know, very boisterous and full of the Spirit. And brother, you know, it felt good, but I felt something else that wasn't, something was supernatural. And I would find out later it was the you know, the host. But at that time, I didn't know what that was. I just knew that I'd stumbled upon something really good.
Now, how did this prepare you? Because by 1991, you have a #1 hit, Love Me. It made you a household name. You were country music gold. You still are. How did it prepare you for that? Because I can imagine that is immediate, pretty heady, and can capsize a life, and we have replete examples of that.
Well, you said it. Capsize is a perfect word, because if you don't have your identity rooted in something greater, then that business will tear you up, because it is it's a let's pat you on the back nonstop business. After years and years of ridicule and rejection, now all of a sudden you're getting raised up every day. You're standing in line, and 800 people are lined up to meet you and get your autograph, and you go, what happened?
Right.
How did this happen? And that part of it I never really sought after. I just wanted to be a successful musician. I wanted my music heard. The other star stuff that came along with it was kind of a surprise and caught me off guard a little bit. But I understood that comes with it, and you deal with it as best you can. And I certainly appreciated that adulation. But I always, because of my faith, which our faith is rooted in humility, I always knew that, hey, here today, gone tomorrow. This is going to come to an end at some point. And why? So I was immediately trying to think, well, why did God allow this to happen to me? Why am I getting this opportunity? Because a lot of my contemporaries at the time, you can tell they just wanted to be famous and rich, like most people that want to get in the business, you know. And I certainly enjoyed the money, and I enjoyed all the other stuff that went with it. But I knew that there was going to be a beginning and an end. And so I was ready for that, and I think my faith is the reason for that. And between that and my family, which I've always put first, that's the true joy of life. And I quickly got used to the fact that this whole country star thing was just my job.
Yeah.
And that's all it was
There's
my job.
also in this life, as you read the book, A Voice Undefeated, you see all these painful interludes of sacrifice, suffering. Your mother having a coma, your brother's accident, your granddaughter, your wife, rather, wife's coma.
Yeah.
It marks you in some ways. How did it mark you? Yet you're apart from it. You're watching it.
Yeah.
But you're not suffering it personally.
Yeah.
Is that harder?
I think it is in many ways, because I think God allows all of us to have something. And in my case, I'm blessed to physically take after my father, who's 80 plus and has never spent the night in the hospital ever, and neither have I, as a patient. But for me, I'm a very extremely healthy guy, and I'm very blessed. But I think he makes some of us strong to be there to take care of others who maybe aren't blessed with that kind of physical health. And so my pain and my suffering has pretty much without fail always been emotional and mental, because of the things that have happened to people that I love so much, and my powerlessness to do anything about it. Because again, as I mentioned, as men, even when you're a young guy, but especially the older you get, the more patriarchal you feel, and you always believe that it is your job to fix everything, and you actually think you can.
Has that mindset and those experiences found their way into your music recently?
Oh yeah, definitely. And in fact, I think with Haley's passing, and it probably began prior to that, because that had already changed my life. Just her illness had changed the focus of my life, but yet I had to keep going. If I had enough money in the bank, and which is probably one reason the Lord allowed me to go through some financial difficulties here and there, because it was things that didn't make any sense. Like, how did that happen? Where did we lose that? I think because He knows in my nature I would have probably quit. And He didn't want me to quit, because I would have just stayed home nonstop, and because I got over this a long time ago, as far as the fun of it or whatever. But I had to keep going, and because a lot of people depended on me, and I think it became apparent to me that He wanted me to keep going, that whatever it is He does through me, because it's not me, whatever He is doing through me, He wants to continue. And if I had just had my way, I would have just said, I'm done. I'm going to stay home. But I've kept going because of that.
And it's changed the music how?
Oh yeah. Well, I think like His Love Remains album we did was a hymns record that it's something I wanted to do for a long time. But I think prior to that, I've always wanted to do it, but I would have been a little afraid to, because immediately you get tagged as, he's on the God squad now. That's what they say a lot. He's done moved on. And it's a point. Well, you're so conscious of protecting your space and protecting your thing,
image,
that it would have been. I always tried to do it in more obscure ways. Drop my faith in there, made some hit songs out of songs like that, but always more, obscure. And this was just a first blatant, outright, yes, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have fun doing it, and I'm so thankful that I got to do it. And then the show, I talk about my faith on stage a lot more than I would have years ago. I don't care if somebody doesn't like it, they can leave. I'll even give them their money back if they want. But I'm going to say not in a preachy way, but I just have to let them know this is how I operate, this is how I'm wired, and this is why this works for me.
Give me your opinion of contemporary country music, something you call bro country. You wrote an op-ed recently about this. What is bro country?
Well, I think I would love to take credit for that tie. Someone else threw that out there, but I'd heard someone use that term, and I thought it fit perfectly. And if you grew up loving, I grew up at a really good time. I grew up at a time when Glenn Campbell and
George Jones
and Waylon Jennings and Willie and Merle Haggard was writing things like Mama's Hungry Eyes and Sing Me Back Home, which was just like Oklahoma Shakespeare. I mean, it was as good as country music ever got and ever will get. And so that's what influenced me. That's what made me want to be one of those, or be like those guys, or at least try my best to. And all of a sudden, in the 90s, there we were, and it was this big, huge renaissance that Garth led the way with. And from him on down, we all knew that we weren't as great as those guys we just talked about. But we knew we were going to try our best to keep the standard up to that they had created. Vince, Martin, everybody was really, it was important.
You saw yourself as part of a continuing tradition.
Carrying the torch.
But you believe that there's been a rupture with that tradition?
Yeah, bad.
And the love affair with the truck.
Oh yeah, and I did. I put this op-ed out a few weeks back, and Fox News ran it, and next thing you know, it started spreading, and I guess that just surprised me how many people agreed with me. But I mean, I saw one negative response to that from a radio station that makes their living off of that stuff, and everything else was 100% pro on my side, you know. And people were like, yeah, finally somebody's saying it. But if for those who don't listen to country music, and modern country music, and I wouldn't recommend that you do at the moment. It's just every song is basically, well, we're right out in the truck, gonna slide them jeans up in my truck, gonna party in the truck, gonna get drunk in the truck, and they're all rapping. And now instead of a solo, a steel solo or guitar solo, it's a rap solo. Yeah. And you just go, oh. And the first couple of hundred of those, I rolled with it, and I thought, well, this is a passing fad. It's still going on, and it's been several years now, and it is sort of. And my fear is not that, hey, to each his own. If someone likes that stuff,
country music has taken a big turn into pop, and in a way that it's aside from occasionally being broadcast from Nashville. Yeah. There's very little to distinguish it as country music.
Distinguished. That's what I'm trying to say to people. Is it's like rock and roll that I also loved. Grew up at a great time for rock and roll, and it's gone. It's dead. Rock and roll is dead. The only places you can find rock and roll on the radio are classic rock.
And you think country music is headed in the same direction?
And the reason rock and roll died is because it was not, the identity was not protected. It bled into mainstream pop, and next thing you know, there's no difference. And the last probably, I didn't really care for that, the grunge movement that happened in the 90s, but at least it was an attempt to keep that raw thing going. Yeah. And then after that, that's pretty much it. So I mean, like you go, where do you hear rock and roll on the radio today? Nowhere. They're gone. It's done. It's over. Yeah. And to me, country music is following suit, and we go back further than they do with our history and our legacy, and it's losing its identity fast. And my call is to people like the gatekeepers in Nashville, you know, CMA, ACM, the label heads. Come on, do what you're supposed to do. Truly be gatekeepers and say enough's enough. If you want to split the genre and let this bro country thing be its own deal, you could call it redneck party boy music, RPB. Yeah. Somebody could say, oh, I'm into RPB. Okay, let them have their own thing, and then let's get country music back to what it is, which is doesn't. And I'm not saying it has to be fiddle. It's not about the music.
No, but country music,
songs,
I always,
lyrics.
You know, I grew up on the old. I told you a moment ago. I saw Sinatra 30 times. I grew up on the American Songbook, Irving Berlin and Cole Porter, and I mean the greats. I always thought the only contemporary version of that we had was country music because it was about people and people in love or out of love. And that's
real
what,
stories.
The things that affect all of us, the things we go through. Not all of us are running around with, you know, collegiates in a truck.
And all those subject matters that those guys, Irving Berlin wrote about and Cole Porter wrote about, real life, but the part of life that we lift up. Right. We celebrate the fact that we can, these are things the animals can't do. Right. In other words, God made us like this. We do love each other and we love people, and it's about real life and real loss and real tragedy. That's what country music was, and that's reality. And reality is not we're going out and get partying in a pasture. Yeah. It may be for a handful of people, but I don't know any of them. Yeah, well, I don't know anybody that parties in a field.
One hopes you would outgrow that pretty quickly, but today you might not. I want to end with this. You make a reference, and you have a favorite saying at the end of the book, and you say, there are those who have been humbled and those who are about to be. What does humility mean to you, and what do you want people to ultimately take away from this work?
Well, I think I know a lot of people right now that are and they're usually younger than me, and this is all because often it comes with age, but they're just good people, and they have good hearts, but they're so stubbornly proud, and they won't take consequences for their actions, and they won't say that they were wrong, and truly, and again, but they're still good people. It doesn't mean they're not good people. They just haven't been brought down yet. And I remember me being like that too. I go, you know, you remind me of me a few years ago. You know, you get to a point where, because you think we do feel like we do have an element of righteousness in us. And the truth of the matter is we have zero except through Him. He's the only righteousness we have. Whatever good we do, when we hug someone earnestly or do a kind act or smile at someone, that's all through Christ. Without that, we have nothing good of our own. And I think people at some point, God wants everybody to go to heaven. He wants everybody to make it. So He's going to try His best but you can't get to that point until you're on your knees. And I think I finished the book with there's something to be said for thinking on your knees. You've got it until you hit your knees in humility. And true humility is not just being sorry for your actions, but realizing you are nothing without God. You are absolutely nothing. If we're good parents to our families, it's because of His grace. Every good thing we do is of Him. And until we come to that point in our mind, in our heart, and realize that, hey, we're just here on His time and on His dime, so to speak, you can't be ready for the next, for eternity. And to me, that is true humility.
Very good. Collin Raye, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Raymond. Bless you.
A Voice Undefeated by Collin Raye is available at bookstores everywhere and online, as well as through EWTN's catalog. Well, that's all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. And I want to tell you about my special offer now. As I mentioned earlier, the first book in my new children's series, Kerman Derman and the Relic of Perilous Falls, hits bookstores everywhere on September 8th. It is a comedic, supernatural thriller for the 11-year-old in all of us. I'll be sharing more details in the days ahead. Last week, I posted the cover on my Facebook and Twitter pages. Now, if you retweet the image or repost it, I may choose you as one of the handful of people to receive an early reader of the entire book. You have one more week to tweet or Facebook the cover, and then I'm picking names. Be the first to experience Kerman Derman and his incredible adventures. The cover is online right now.